Welcome to Florida is Our Domain.
Welcome back to Florida is Our Domain with Tony Policastro. Tony is a Florida eminent domain attorney with over 3 decades of experience helping businesses and property owners secure full compensation when the government takes land. He's handled more than 1,000 parcels across Florida, working closely with top experts to build strong strategic cases. I'm Kevin Rosenquist, and in this episode, we're talking about the behind-the-scenes players who make a huge difference in eminent domain claims, like appraisers, engineers, planners, and accountants, and why having the right team matters more than most people realize. Tony, good to see you.
Good to see you again, Kevin.
So we touched on this a little bit last episode, but I think it's good for us to unpack it even further. Well, let's start here. Most people don't realize just how many professionals are involved beyond just you, the attorney. Why are these experts so critical in eminent domain cases?
Well, the experts are so critical because they really help put the case together. So when you hire the attorney, if you hire an experienced eminent domain attorney, they're going to look for very experienced experts who work all the time in the field of eminent domain. So it's important to put a team together. I mean, you always want to have that civil engineer. Now, the experts I use do things other than eminent domain. So they do a variety of things, and they may be part of, developing properties. And if they're in engineering, they may be appraisers that appraise for different situations other than eminent domain. But you want to get that team together of a civil engineer, a real estate appraiser, as you mentioned, a land planner is often needed, a contractor could be needed. If it's a business, a CPA is needed. Sometimes you also need FF&E appraisers, which are furniture, fixtures, and equipment appraisers. So there's a number of different folks out there that you assemble the team, and that team really builds on top of each other. So it always starts usually with the engineer and their report and the land planner. And then it often goes to the contractor who's going to cost things out. They may cost improvements in the take area. They may cost out the cost to cure, which, to help fix the problem. They will be part of that. The contractor can also be part of if we're taking a look at the various different approaches with the appraiser, and they could be very valuable in the cost approach to figure out what it would be to cost out how to build that home or that building new. And then the appraiser puts a depreciation on that. So that's just an example of there's a lot of different facets to the case, and you're building the case out, and that is what constitutes your counteroffer.
Okay. And with the appraisers, like their report is going to differ from the one done by the government a lot of times, I would imagine, correct?
It does. And a lot of that has to do with the condemning authority often either doesn't have the time, or again, I think I've mentioned this on previous episodes, they're often the lowest bidder, frankly. So they take a cookie cutter approach to their sales. They also sometimes make decisions to not do both a before and after appraisal of the property. And therefore, they sort of miss completely what the effect of the taking is on the property in the after. And that's when they don't ascertain any sort of severance damages to a property. So they take a much more a surface look at it. And myself with my team of experts, we tend to, get much more particular and have just a deeper dive on what's going on with the property and what's the effect of this taking. I mean, it's so important to know what the effect of the taking is, right? Because you only get one bite at the apple, as I always say. So you only get one shot at getting this thing right, because that's your counteroffer. And once the case settles, it settles. So unless something strange happens, like they change the construction plans or do something that isn't the basis of the settlement, that's it. If you've missed it, you can't go back. And that's why, again, it is so important for people to have an experienced eminent domain attorney with an experienced team of really good experts who, are very well versed in eminent domain law and definitely have, that jury trial experience so they can, be prepared to successfully litigate your case if necessary.
Can you talk a bit about the engineer and the land planner and what exactly they provide to someone whose property is being taken?
Well, the engineer definitely provides that expertise. I'm used to looking at construction plans, but there's just a different level, obviously, for
Yeah.
somebody who's graduated and has a civil engineering degree beyond what, attorneys become sort of jack of all trades. We learn a little bit about engineering and appraising and contracts, estimates and land planning, but there's nothing like that person that has devoted their life to that specific discipline. So the engineer really, to me, is just about the most important person on a partial take because they're the person that lets how is this taking affecting your property? How is it going to affect the access to your property? How is it going to affect your on-site drainage to your property? How is the grade change? Is that going to put your property in a hole? What sort of changes are going to take place? What sort of traffic is going to go by your home in the after situation? Is there a median going up in the existing right of way or even in the part that they're taking? Is there going to be a bike path going by? What sort of changes are going to be happening to that road? Is it going 2 lanes, 4 lanes, 6 lanes? When is construction going to happen? So those are all really important things that the engineer helps out with. They also can help out with if there's a retention pond going on your property. They can take a look at the pond siting report and let you know if the government has considered all alternatives, or are they just putting the pond on your property maybe to try to avoid business damages by doing a whole take of your property. So there's a lot of things that the engineer can assist with that I think are fundamentally important to the case, really for everybody. Then the land planner is also very important because a land planner definitely helps the appraiser determine what is the highest best use of this property. Yes, it may look like it's agricultural property, but there's a lot of housing developments, say, going on, and there might be a density issue where you can put on how many houses per acre, or maybe you could put multiple family on, which means townhomes on the property eventually. So the land planner will take a look at, what's happening in the foreseeable future, what's happening in the next 5 to 10 years with growth, and are you really maximizing the value of your property by calling it agricultural, or is it transitioning into a greater use, which is going to allow the appraiser to use comparable sales that are of more of an intense use? So again, agricultural to residential, or it could be residential going to office, or residential eventually going to commercial. So those are all important things that they can help you with. The land planner, as I've said on the previous episode, will be really good at taking a look at the codes and ordinances that a particular county has, and evaluating how those codes and ordinances play into your property before and after the taking.
Okay, now what about when you get to the financial side, the accountants, financial experts? What are they, when do they get involved, and what are they looking at?
Well, the accountants can get involved early on in the case. I usually, if someone comes to me and I believe they're going to have a business damage claim, and again, they have to be, when the taking occurs, they have to be in business on that property for 5 consecutive years. You can always tack on somebody else's time. So if somebody owns the flower shop and they've sold the business to you, and it's, the flower shop was there 10 years before, but you've only owned it for 3 years, you can still make a business damage claim as long as that business hasn't shut and the nature of the business has stayed the same, again, for 5 consecutive years. It doesn't really matter who the owner is at the time of the taking. But getting back to what you had asked, which is, well, when do you get the CPA involved? I like to get them involved as soon as I can to take a look at, what's going on with this business from a financial standpoint. And are there anything that they need to do to help bolster the business? So for instance, in case law for businesses and business damage claims, the owner either has to be taking a reasonable manager's salary for the property, or for the business rather, or the accountant, when they get involved in it, has got to essentially come up with a way that the salary should have been paid. So if the owner isn't really taking out a salary, then he might take a look at what would it cost someone to manage this. What would you pay someone to manage this business? So say that'd be $50,000. Well, then you have to kind of deduct that down, and there's a calculation, and that impacts the overall business damage claim. So you want to take a look at that. You want to take a look at leases on the property, if there are any leases. You want to make sure that there's a lot of time left on that lease when the condemning authority takes the property. You want to have, when I say a substantial amount of time, you want to have 10 years or more. So sometimes, you want to create options for your business owner. And then you either reach out to the landlord, or if the business and landlord are the same person, they can easily do that, obviously, for themselves. So there's a lot of facets to look in and make sure everything is orderly with the business records, because eventually, in order to make a business damage claim, you're going to have to turn in the last 5 years of business records, and that will be the basis of your business damage claim.
Okay, this sounds like a lot. Is this something that you coordinate?
Yes, so we coordinate that. How it actually starts, if you do all that prep work before, and that's kind of pre-condemnation planning, if you will, but when the accountant really begins to do all of his or her work is when the business owner receives his notice to business owner letter, or is put on notice that they have 180 days to put together their business records and get a business valuation expert or a CPA to come up with what they believe their business damage claim is. And then you submit that to the condemning authority, and then they have 120 days from when they receive it to respond. And then they can respond by accepting the business damage offer, which they never do, or they can not respond, and essentially you're at zero, or they can respond and they make you a offer less than your claim, but then that will usually, kick off negotiations to try to get more money for the business owner.
And who pays for all these experts? Does the client pay for that, or does
No,
Florida law cover those?
The great news in Florida is that we are a pro property right and a pro business owner rights state. So at the end of the day, all of these experts are paid for by whoever condemns the property. The experts are always entitled to a reasonable fee at the end of the case. So the experts keep all their hours, and we submit their invoices to the condemning authority at the end of the case. Often those invoices are negotiated, but even if they're negotiated for something less than full invoice, we never look to or I don't look to my clients to pay the difference between, what the invoice amount was and what the expert ultimately received through a settlement with the government agency.
Okay, well, that's cool. That's nice to know for people that they don't have to float that bill, because I'm sure that gets pretty pricey.
Oh, it would be. If you had to pay for your attorney and all your experts, at the end of the day, you probably have half of your compensation left.
Wow. Yeah.
Sort of like that would be more like a PI case, right? A personal injury case.
Yeah. What are the considerations that you feel are most overlooked in the condemning authorities' reports?
I think that they tend to, again, not do that deep enough dive into the property, and so reports are often a little bit surface. So they don't necessarily pick up a lot of the nuances of the property, how that property functions in the before. So if they don't know how that property really functions, they may think, for instance, I will tell you this happens a lot, which kind of drives me a little nuts, is that you will hear from the condemning authority, well, they have more parking than code requires. So therefore, if we're taking out 20 parking spaces and they still have the exact number they need for code, then there's really no damage, believe it or not. And so that is just, to me, a horrible position, but they tend to have taken those positions over the years. And so those are things that they miss. So for instance, they'll say, oh, somebody has this shopping plaza, this retail plaza, and we've been out there 2 or 3 times, or we've looked at it over the course of a week in July, and we don't see all the parkings being used, so we're taking 5 parking spaces. It's not going to hurt the business. Well, they don't know that, the parking for it might be seasonal, right? Mm-hmm. So maybe, in season in Florida, it's going to be packed, or it may be a type of business where it's going to be packed during the holidays and they're going to need all their parking in November and December. So these are things that they don't always take into account and that they completely miss.
Interesting to take one small amount of time and just assume that that's the same throughout the entire year.
Yeah, but that happens, unfortunately. So those are things that they miss and overlook. So
Well, another example, like you always say, you need a good and experienced eminent domain attorney.
Correct.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's it for today's episode of Florida is Our Domain. When it comes to eminent domain, having the right experts can mean the difference between a lowball offer and full compensation. If your property or business is being affected by a public process, don't go it alone. Visit policastrolaw.com to schedule a consultation and learn how Tony and his team can help. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave us a review. Tony, I always love chatting with you. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, Kevin. Always a pleasure.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.